Hello, everyone. Jerome Harris here from eprophetic.com, and this audio presentation will be about do not follow his lead. Now, at the outset, one would think that I'm talking about not following Christ or following a God. Not at all. What I'm referring to is not following the lead of men. We have only one leader, and that leader is the Master, Christ himself, who says of himself at John chapter 14, verse 6, that I am the way, truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by me. But what do we see in the world today? We see religious organizations, whether they be of Christendom, that is Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, all the various religions, and even within the religious system called by men Christianity, there are more than 41,000 contending denominations. I like to always bring this up in my audio talks when it relates. And what they all do is they're masters at harvesting a people into themselves as organizations, as an organizational body. Now get that, as an organizational body, so as to control persons. And so this harvesting of people it isn't a harvesting of people into the body of Christ. There's a difference. But a harvesting of individuals into that particular religious organization. In other words, one has to join that particular religious organization and follow its lead, follow its teachings. So essentially what these organizations are doing, and these religious systems are doing, is that they are saying that they are the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by or through them. There's a difference. While none of them will claim that's what they're doing, and I do sincerely believe that some of them do not realize that's what they're doing, but in actual practice, that is exactly what is occurring. Now let me give you an example. Myself being a former Jehovah's Witness for more than 25 years, and really going on more than 30 years, and I had disassociated myself from the organization, and that's another story. But when I was a member of that organization, in the very beginning, the way you become a member is that they make it appealing to become a member. You see, they don't accept you as a full-fledged Jehovah's Witness in the beginning. You have to go through a series of steps before you can become a baptized Jehovah's Witness. And one of those steps is to engage in what is called Bible study. The Bible study process involves studying, they say, the Bible, but what it really is, it's a study of the Watchtower publications that mention the Bible. You see, it's sort of like backwards, though the claim is what you're doing is you're studying the Bible, but see, the Bible can't be studied without Watchtower publications to aid you in understanding the Bible. And again, like I say, it's really a study of the many Watchtower publications, and it is a subtle indoctrination into the teachings of the organization. For example, the Bible, or Christ himself in his teachings, never mentioned a thing called 1914. This is the date that the Watchtower organization says that Christ's second presence occurred, his second return, his parousia. But yet the publications that they claim as a part of the Bible study program, see, the publications speak of it. So you see, it's not really a Bible study, but it is a study of the Watchtower publications, and you become accustomed to and attached to those publications. You can't have a Bible in one hand without the publications in the other, such as the Watchtower, the Awake, and the many publications that are actually studied throughout the week. At book studies, you get them at the conventions and so forth. Well, all of this is a harvesting of individuals into the organizational body itself. And then that's how they control you. And I'm not just picking on the Watchtower organization. They all do things like this. Misleading persons to think that by going through all these steps and through these processes, that what they're doing is they're becoming members or being attached to Christ. That's not the case. They're being attached to or becoming members of man-made organizations as opposed to the person of Christ himself. And once they harvest individuals into these organizations, then they can hook them and lead them in any direction that they please. And that's why we see today all these many contending so-called Christian organizations and denominations that claim that they're all right. 41,000 contending denominations all can't be right when they all teach something different. You see, Christ is being taught divided. In fact, Christ is not being taught at all. You know, one organization can't say that, say hell is an eternal place of torment, and another one says that it's not. One organization can't say that hell is a grave, and another one say that it's a place of fiery torment, eternal torment. One organization can't say that Christ's return occurred in 1914, and another one says not. Or one organization can't say that Christ's return occurred in 1914, and one says in 1874. You see, so it's like they all make these lofty claims as to being the right religion, when in fact all of them are wrong, because all of them, none of them rather, are of God and of Christ. But yet people go into them and they follow them, they become loyal to them, and that is all they know. They get hemmed in. The indoctrination is so thick that it is difficult to even reason with many of these people. It's like they're drunk, like they're blinded. A person coming along speaking things that are different from what they were taught, they look at individuals as if there's something wrong with them. You see, when the Master came on the scene more than 2,000 years ago, it was the Jewish religious system that had held the Jews in captivity. You see, when the Master came, there was no such thing as Christianity. So he didn't come, the Most High God didn't send him to Christians, obviously because there weren't no such thing as Christians. And that's another story. There were Jews. He sent his son to the Jews. Why? Because the Jewish religion, the Most High God had given the children of Abraham the Mosaic law. And they were bound by that law. Christ comes along more than 2,000 years ago, and the Jewish people are in captivity to that law. They're bound by it. They live by it or they die by it. They're bound to keep it. And the teachers of the law, the Pharisees, really were hard knockers, and they held the people to the letter of the law while they themselves were hypocritical and they didn't keep it. Jesus comes along and he says that he didn't come to end the law, but to fulfill it. Now, a lot of people don't understand what Jesus was talking about there. When he said that, he was simply saying to the Jews that, look, I have fulfilled the law. I didn't come to end it, but I fulfilled it. In other words, I finished it so you don't have to keep it. Now you become my disciples. And he even gave them a new law, one law. And then at John chapter 8, verse 31 and 32, what does he say? The first thing he says is this to the Jews, that if you cling to my teachings, then you are truly my disciples. And then you know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Set you free from what? I mean, you hear a lot of people today toss that expression around. You'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They leave out that first part, to the Jews. And they never make the connection that when Jesus made that statement, he was talking to the Jews saying, look, I'm here now. So if you become my disciples, in other words, you've listened to what I teach you now. I mean, you know what was taught to you a long time ago under the law covenant. But Jesus is saying to the Jews, if you cling to my teachings, listen to what I teach you, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. In other words, set them free from ever having to keep that law. Likewise, Jesus' first 12 disciples were who? They were Jews. He called them out. He called them out of that Jewish religious system, and they became his disciples. In other words, they were taught by him directly. They weren't taught by some religious system or some religious organization. They were taught by Christ himself, and that's Christ's command to us that we become his disciples. Any person today or in the past coming out of any religious system, whether they're Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, Catholics, Lutherans, whatever, you come out of all that and you become a disciple of the person of Christ himself, and you learn his teachings. Not the Watchtower, the Mormons, or the Seventh-day Adventist teachings and all that stuff, the Catholic teachings, Lutheran teachings, Pentecostals, Episcopalians, or whatever. You learn his teachings, then you know the truth. You see, the truth doesn't come until you first are taught by Christ. That's what he says. You become his disciples, the taught one. Then you know the truth, because that's what he's going to speak. And he said at John chapter 14, verse 6, that I am the way and the truth. So whatever he teaches is going to be the truth. Why? Because it comes from the Most High God. Then you know the truth, and the truth will set you free from the religious organizations that hold people today in captivity. And Christ spoke of that captivity in the book of Revelation, and I won't go into that right now. So, do not follow the lead of men, because it has not been given to men to lead other men. Oh, they love to do that. Mankind loves to dominate other men. Love it. Anyone today who is a true disciple of Christ, in other words, you cling to his teachings. And let me make this perfectly clear. I'm not saying persons who love to defend the particular religious teachings of an organization. Teachings of religious organizations, no matter what they call themselves, Christian or Witnesses or Mormons or Seventh-day Adventists, their teachings are not the teachings of Christ. Those are the teachings of a religious organization. So what I say to you is this: when you listen to the teachings of Christ, the person who is alive, then you are standing on stable ground. You're standing on a firm foundation. And you are being obedient to the Most High God. Why is that? Because at Luke chapter 9, verse 35, the Most High God himself says, he says, this is my son who I have approved or authorized. Listen to him. He didn't say listen to a religious organization and through them listen. He says listen to his son. And this is where millions have gone wrong. They don't listen to his son. They're listening to these men and women and the leadership of these religious organizations that they establish and make lofty claims about themselves. And again, like I said before, they harvest people into themselves. Then the indoctrination begins. And they mislead these people. It happened to me. And it just didn't occur to me until 20, 25 years later on that I was being misled. I mean, it all sounded very good and convincing when I was, in it. I felt very comfortable. No one can tell me anything different. And it wasn't some human being who opened my eyes up to it. I'm referring to when I was a former Jehovah's Witness. I'm sitting in the Kingdom Hall. Understand now, we're talking some 25, going on 30 years as a baptized Jehovah's Witness who had Bible studies, who what they call Bible studies, myself leading people into the organization, having many responsibilities within the organization itself. I'm simply one day sitting at a meeting and I'm hearing things spoken, and it just something came over me, and I said, this doesn't, something isn't right, because I began to hear less and less about the Most High God and His Son, and more about the organization of the Watchtower and the governing body and elders, and it was more about the organization than it was about Christ, and it was subtle, and it got to the point where the organization became larger than life, and it was more important than anything. And then I went back to review the baptismal view that I took as Jehovah's Witness, and I read it. And I found something quite interesting there, and one has to look at it very closely or else you would miss it. And that baptismal view, vow, the second part of it, essentially said that unless I became associated with God's Spirit-directed organization, that I cannot be a servant of the Most High God. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm saying, wait a minute. This is a religious organization of men telling me that I can't be a servant of God. I can't be a worshiper of God unless I'm attached to the Watchtower Spirit-directed organization. So wait a minute. But yet Jesus himself says that he's the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by himself. But an organization is making that claim about itself. And think about that. The Watchtower baptismal view says that unless you are associated with the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, you cannot be a servant. Or in other words, you cannot be a Jehovah's Witness. In other words, you're not considered a servant of God, a worshiper of God. Therefore, it's saying that the only way that you can be considered a worshiper of God is that you are associated with or attached to an organization. I'm saying, oh my goodness, what is this? Not once does that baptismal vow say anything about the Holy Spirit. This is God's Spirit-directed organization. That's two different things. God's Spirit-directed organization is not the Holy Spirit. Now, those who are Jehovah's Witnesses know what I'm about to say is absolutely true. None will deny this. Once one becomes a Jehovah's Witness, they will hear the expression tossed about within conversation, in the truth. All Jehovah's Witnesses know what this expression, in the truth, refers to. It refers to those who are within the Watchtower organization as being in the truth. So you may hear a Jehovah's Witness speak to another witness by saying, are you in another person, are you in the truth? Or they'll say that we are in the truth, meaning that they are in an organization that is the truth. So now we have an organization making a lofty claim as to what Jesus says that he himself is. And what was that? Jesus says that he is the truth. John chapter 14, verse 6. So now we have the Watchtower organization saying, as I mentioned previously, as being the way. And it says it is the truth. Now, what about the other thing that Jesus said concerning that he says, I am the life. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Does the Watchtower say that of itself that it is the life? Yes, it does. How so? Here's something else that Jehovah's Witnesses will not deny, if they're honest. Witnesses believe that they exist now in what is called a spiritual paradise. And what that means is attending the 5 meetings per week, attending the conventions, engaging in the field service arrangement, of fellowshipping with each other. It's all considered being in a spiritual paradise. There's nothing, there's nothing of a paradise just by attending meetings or going out on field service. People have real problems, real issues like everyone else. In other words, those witnesses you have single moms, people who work every day, who can't get to the meetings, who can't get on field service, and they have financial problems, the same problems the whole world has, people have. So there's no paradise. See, that's yet to come. And that can only come by Christ himself. But yet the Watchtower organization claims that those who become Jehovah's Witnesses will be within a spiritual paradise. And this is an expression not found that Jesus himself never uttered. So see, expressions are being made up. So now we have an organization claiming that that's the lifestyle, that's the life a person is cast into once they become a Jehovah's Witness. You see, so they make a claim for themselves that they are the life. This is what you want to be doing. So it's a subtle thing. But getting back to what I was saying earlier, and this ties into what I was saying about following the lead of men. Don't do it. Follow Christ. Religious organization is clever. Before you know it, you're in captivity and you can't even see the walls that hem you in. I guarantee you, as a Jehovah's Witness, the indoctrination is so thick, and it's not just what the witnesses either. I'm saying it's all of them. I'm speaking only from the organization that I had the most experience with, and there were others before them. But once you're so heavily indoctrinated, you don't realize that you're in a prison. Witnesses today sit in the kingdom halls fearful. They're fearful of the circuit overseer, district overseers, the elders, the governing body. I tell you, when the traveling overseer comes to visit a particular kingdom hall, people go nuts. They act like a drill sergeant is coming for an inspection. They're running around, they're wearing their best clothes, they're cutting the kingdom hall grass, and they're doing housekeeping and cleaning. It's all external stuff. The books are examined because they know that when the traveling circuit overseer comes, he's checking field service records to see who is not engaging in the field service arrangement, and that becomes a problem. They make it a problem. See, it's a problem when a person is not putting in so many hours a week, and he's going to want to know why that person's not out there, and he's going to look at the elders and say, okay, what's the problem? See, they make it a problem when it really is not a problem, but that's what they make it a problem, and people become nervous. Witnesses become nervous when they know that elders are going to visit their homes, what they call hospitality visits. A hospitality visit is a way to keep you. It's really a polite way to say, look, we're visiting you because we haven't seen you at the meetings, or we don't see you on field service. So is there a problem? Yeah, I got bills, I got a job, I got kids to take care of, mouths to feed, I got to work. You see, they're more concerned about that. And also to make sure that you are still in tune with what they teach. They want to assess if somehow you strayed away from the teaching, and they want to get you aligned back in with that teaching by suggesting that a Bible study. See, let's study, but it's not a Bible study, it's a study of the publication. See, to get you realigned. See, all these controls are in place to keep you within that fence. If you even voice a disagreement or challenge some particular teaching with that organization, see, that becomes a problem. See, and many witnesses are afraid to even think differently. See, not just simply voice a difference or challenge or a question, but to even think it. See, they're fearful of that. Because if another witness hears you say something that is contrary to what's taught by the organization, you're going to get snitched on. Back in the 80s, there was a big housekeeping sweep up at the headquarters in New York, the Watch organization, where many high-level persons, highly respected individuals, even a governing body member, were kicked out of the organization without really a hearing. And these individuals, anything that they voiced was voiced in private amongst themselves, and there were simply questions and things that they had doubts about, and they questioned. And that's what's interesting, because when one becomes a Jehovah's Witness, before you become a witness, like I said earlier, you have to go through the publications, and then you got to go through, sit before a body of elders and answer their questions. And if you successfully pass that test, then you're a candidate to get baptized at one of the conventions. But you have to pass that Bible study test. And it's not questions about the Bible, it's questions about the publications that you study. And in the beginning, when you become before you become a witness, they tell you to, they're very good at having you examine the false teachings of other religions and to question those teachings in accordance to 1 John chapter 4, verse 1. But once you become a witness, such examination is frowned upon if you apply 1 John chapter 4, verse 1 to the Watchtower organization. In other words, question and challenge everyone else, but don't question or challenge the Watchtower organization, because they consider themselves as being God's organization. See, that's how they cover and get out of self-examination. Now, myself, I wasn't kicked out of the organization. I left quietly. In fact, my departure was so quiet, people didn't even know that I had left until some years later afterwards, because they said, well, where's Ron? What happened to him? I don't know. Maybe he went to another congregation. He moved. No, I quietly left the organization. I submitted my letter of disassociation, and I left over differences of the things that they were teaching as opposed to what Christ himself said. And the list is many. One of the major things that really became a turning point for me in my life was being loyal to Christ as to what he taught. For example, the 1914 date, a date that the Watchtower organization claims for itself, but they didn't. That wasn't a date that they conceived. It was a date that Charles Taze Russell borrowed from the Second Adventist movement. And when he left that movement and formed his Bible study group, he simply adopted it. But anyway, the 1914 date is a date that the Watchtower says Christ was made king. And it was the beginning of the last days. It's also the year that the appointed times of the nations ended. And more commonly, that it's the year that Jesus' return occurred. Now, that's what they publish, and they published that for many, many years. Even before that date even came about, they published the year 1914 as being the date that Christ's return in the heavens invisibly would occur. Well, at Matthew chapter 24, verse 36, Jesus says that's not possible. He says no one knows that. He says even I don't know. The angels don't know that. Only the Father knows that. And the supporting scriptures are Matthew chapter 24, verse 42, and Acts chapter 1, verse 7. Jesus says that you do not know when your master is going to return. But yet the Watchtower organization is saying, we do know. It occurred in the year 1914. Now myself, a thinking person, says, now wait a minute, I've got a problem here. Who am I going to believe? The Watchtower organization, to which I was a member at the time, or am I going to obey what Christ says? If Christ says you do not know when I'm going to return, and I got an organization sitting here teaching me and telling me and imposing upon me aggressively that we do know, and that year was 1914, I got a problem. Either they're lying or Christ himself is lying. Well, Christ isn't lying. So I had a difference with the organization over that issue. And so that's one of the major reasons why I quietly left the organization. Now, one must understand that the 1914 date, as related to the Washoe organization, is a very pivotal date. It's a part of their foundation. That lots of the prophecies that they speak about in the publications and what they teach their membership hinges upon the accuracy of 1914. In other words, if the 1914 date crumbles or is not true, then everything else, almost everything else that they teach, crumbles, falls to the wayside. Because the year they established 1914 as being the date that Jesus' return occurred. And upon that, they build up other teachings. The last days. Well, suppose the last days hasn't occurred, and I believe this. We're nowhere near the last days. In fact, I believe that we are still existing in a time period called the Gentile times, or the appointed times of the nations. And if one thinks about that expression, the appointed times of the nations, that means that the nations have a time appointed or allotted to them. That appointment will one day end. But when that ends, something has to follow that. What? That is when Christ is enthroned as king. At present, Christ is not king. He's waiting to be given his kingdom of 1,000 years, which is yet to come. And even when that comes, that 1,000-year paradise over the earth, and when it comes and goes, it's not over with. You see, one must understand that Christ's kingdom is a definite kingdom. It has a beginning and it has an end. In fact, at Matthew chapter 24, verse 3, that's exactly what his disciples were asking him. His disciples asked him, what will be the sign of your return and the end of the age? See, people take what the disciples are asking Christ as being the end of this world. That's not what they're asking. They have a vested interest in knowing when will his kingdom of 1,000 years begin. They're saying, how will we know when your kingdom has begun? And when will it end? See, they know that when he returns, his return will be as a king. So they're asking him, when will be the sign of your return? And the follow-up question is, okay, and what will be the end of the age, the end of that age, that 1,000-year period? Christ's 1,000-year kingdom is not indefinite. It's not eternal. It has a beginning and it has an ending. And when it ends, something has to happen. Revelation chapter 20, verses 6 through 8 tells us Satan is released from the abyss, and then he has to establish over the earth his throne. And we don't know how long that's going to be. It's not going to be 1,000 years, but it's going to be for some significant time period. It could be a generation or two. We don't know. But Satan's throne over the earth will be definite. It will have a beginning. It will have an ending. And when his kingdom or his throne over the earth, the future ends, it's called the beast, then an indefinite kingdom will come down to the earth, and it will never end, and that's God's kingdom. These things are not being taught within the religious system called by men Christianity. As far as I know, I'm the only person talking about this. And I've searched high and low the internet. That's why my blog at eprophetic.com is significant. People like to paint pictures of other persons as being crazy, but see, what they perceive as crazy is simply immaturity as far as I'm concerned, because it is simply saying that, well, that goes against the things that I was taught. And the way I see it is, I tell people, look, just take your two hands and make a small circle with your hands. Well, and look within that circle. Well, that's your sphere of understanding. That sphere has to be expanded. And also look at that circle and realize that you're inside that circle, and around you is a fence that you can't get beyond. If you're inside that circle, you're within captivity. So you have to expand your sphere, that circle, to the point where there's no boundaries anymore. You're free to think and to reason and to approach God in prayer through his Son and ask him for his wisdom, his understanding, and his knowledge. So therefore I say to you, those of you who are listening, don't follow the lead of men. Men are murderers. They're like Cain. Look around you. The religious systems, memberships of these religious systems are killing each other. They wear military uniforms, and they're saluting flags, and they want loyalty to God and nation. That's like mixing oil and water. I'm watching a program now on one of the armed forces networks here, and it's got John Wayne here, and they all look like they're all patriotic, Americans, and they come across as being the good guys, but they're murderers, all of them. You look at the push of the nations today, the Western bloc of nations upon the nations who are non-European, for example. It's an invasion. And they drag God into their conflicts and make people believe that God's behind them and God's backing them up. Yet at the same time, they got an M16 thrown over their shoulders. They appear clean shaven and clean looking. And I'm saying, no, it's evil. You're killing people. Don't drag God into your petty conflicts. These are men leading, and I'm going to put something else on that. They're misleading other persons. These are hateful acts, something Christ never taught his disciples to do. And they've turned the world around by misleading it. And I say to you, do not follow their lead. I'm not going to mention the color of these persons, but I will mention the European conceived universe that we have all been cast into. Do not follow this lead. Follow the one that the Most High God sent and listen to him. It has nothing to do with a person being black or white. I'm simply saying you must think, and you see these images in magazines and art and literature and film of Adam and Eve and angels and Jesus, the apostles, Moses, Noah, all being portrayed as persons of European descent. Reject these images. They're all false. Don't follow the lead of the persons who are portraying this. In fact, the individuals I just mentioned, Adam and Eve, angels, and so forth, should not be portrayed in the likeness of any race of man. Any. And people wonder, well, why they're doing it. And I said, wait a minute, look at the people who are trying to defend themselves. They make them as being the bad guys. These people are simply defending themselves, and they're resisting this invasion. The true terrorists aren't the persons who people say are terrorists. Of course, some of them do bad things, but we can't just look at them, the bad things that some of them are doing. Look at what these European-based nations are doing. Why aren't their acts being portrayed as being terrorist? Now, I've lived to know that it was a European-based nation that dropped the most terrible weapon upon another people, a non-European-based people, the atomic bomb. So that wasn't an act of terrorism? Shock and awe campaigns with these weapons of mass destruction, killing millions, tens of thousands rather, of innocent people. That wasn't an act of terrorism? The African slave trade and the mistreatment of Africans brought to the Americas and the West Indies, these weren't acts of terrorism? The Crusades and the Spanish Inquisitions and the Salem witch hunts, these weren't acts of terrorism? It hasn't stopped. There's an aggression going on right now. And what is marching in front of it is a cross. In the name of God, in the name of Christ, these things are being done. It was in the name of God and Christ that the African slave trade took place. It was a pope who endorsed it. But you read about these things in the history books. So I say to you, do not follow the lead of men. Follow Christ. This is R. Jerome Harris from prophetic.com. Thank you for listening.